oriented.
Thank you so much. Muchas gracias. Hola, buenas tardes. Yo me llamo Talis, estoy aquí con mi cointérprete Vicente. Venimos representando a Tilde y vamos a ser sus intérpretes simultáneos del español al inglés y del inglés al español durante esta llamada. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Talis. I am here with my co-interpreter Vicente, and we will be providing simultaneous interpretation during today's call between English and Spanish. And to access interpretation for everybody who is not fully bilingual in English and Spanish, if you could please go ahead and click on the little globe that's at the bottom center of your screen if you're here via computer. You can select that and there you'll be able to select the English channel. If you are bilingual in English and Spanish, you don't need to select a channel, but if you are not, please go ahead and select the English channel. And if you're here via a smartphone, there are 3 little dots at the bottom right corner of your Zoom app that say More. You can click that and then select Language Interpretation, and then once again, select the English channel. Entonces, para acceder a la interpretación para la llamada del día de hoy, para todas las personas que no sean bilingües en inglés y en español o que prefieran escuchar y participar en la llamada en español, para acceder a la interpretación, si están aquí a través de una computadora, hay un globito en la parte inferior, en medio de su pantalla, que dice interpretación. Si pueden adelante y hacer clic ahí y seleccionar el canal de español, si es que prefieren escuchar y participar en español. Si son bilingües y quieren escuchar y participar tanto en inglés como en español, pueden dejar la interpretación apagada. Y si están aquí a través de un teléfono inteligente, hay 3 puntitos en la parte inferior derecha de su aplicación de Zoom que dicen más. Pueden hacer clic ahí, seleccionar interpretación de idiomas y de nuevo ahí pueden seleccionar su canal de preferencia, inglés o español. And just a couple reminders to help us out tonight. If you could please keep your mic muted when you're not actively participating, so that we can hear the person that is speaking and so that we're better able to interpret everything that's being said. And please also remember to speak at a moderate pace, especially when we read or when we get excited, we tend to speak a lot faster than we realize. Just a reminder, we're interpreting everything you're saying in real time into the other language. So slow it down for us so that we don't miss out on anything and we're able to interpret your full message. Un par de recordatorios, por favor, hablar a un ritmo moderado, un poquito más lento, haciendo pausas, especialmente cuando leemos o hablamos de algo muy emocionante, tendemos a acelerarnos más de lo que creemos. Entonces, por favor, hablar un poquito más lento para que no nos perdamos de nada y podamos interpretar su mensaje completo al otro idioma. And lastly, if there's any issues with interpretation, just let us know through the chat and we will help you out as soon as we can. Por último, si hay algún problema con la interpretación, avísenos a través del chat y les ayudaremos en cuanto podamos. Muchísimas gracias. Que tengan una excelente llamada. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful call. Back to you.
Thank you so very much for that. And so we are going to go ahead and get started. Let me queue up myself so I can be among the scene here. Greetings, everyone. I hope all is well with you. Most of us know each other and are quite familiar with this work together, but for those that may see this video later, my name is Tafari Melasizwe. I am the communications coordinator for the Dignity in Schools campaign, and we are super excited to be joined by DSC members, by other DSC staff, folks that are working on this and other projects, and really just want to welcome you all to something that we've been working on for the last 18 months or so of this youth-led participatory action research project that is really looking at and analyzing the conditions, the experiences, and the stories that young people in select sites across the nation are navigating, dealing with, challenging, successfully organizing against, and ultimately, again, dealing with as a portrait of what is going on in our schools. If we talk about, public infrastructure and institutions like our school buildings and education as microcosms of what's happening in our communities, then it's important for us to return to the source, if you will, of gathering the stories and experiences by those that are experiencing them. And so we are overjoyed to be in community with you all this evening, to check out some of the findings so far, some of the conversations so far, some of the learnings so far. So though I'm talking a lot at the front end here, you'll hear less of my voice in the evening, starting now, actually, with one of our coordinating committee members, Keandre, who will be sharing the principles of unity with us, which really kind of are the glue that holds the DSC together. So, Keandre, the floor is yours.
All right, good afternoon, beautiful people. Keandre, Keo, if you know me, from Boston, representing the Boston Student Advisory Council. And as Tafari said, as DSC members, we make our best efforts to apply the following practices of unity to our work together. The first one is we challenge the systemic problems of school push out in our nation's traditional public and charter schools, and offer recommendations to promote local and national alternatives to a culture of zero tolerance, criminalization, and punishment and removal. Second one is we advocate for human rights and self-determination of all young people to a first-rate quality and equitable education, to be treated with dignity, to be free from discrimination, and to participate in decision-making that affects their education and future opportunities in life. Let's see, the third one next. Our coalition is a diverse group representing youth, parents, educators, and advocates. We strive to be led by youth and families most impacted by school pushout and zero tolerance disciplinary practices. Youth who have been suspended or surveilled for suspension, expelled, pushed out, or criminalized, and their families. DAC members work collectively to expand our knowledge base and shift power to those most impacted. The fourth is we make sure that our members, and especially those directly impacted, are own and make decisions about their use of their stories, their data analysis, their solutions, and their victories. The fifth is we are building a strong, clear, and explicit analysis in our work at all levels, intentionally examining issues such as race, class, gender identity, sexual orientation, immigration status, ability, religion, language, and age. We regularly self-reflect and evaluate our practices as we seek to challenge injustice, be it in our own selves, our organizations, our communities, or our movement. As we grow our analysis and political education, some of our terminology may change to allow reflection on our own current thinking. The sixth is we put movement identity ahead of organizational identity. We are building a common set of political goals and strategies appropriate to build the leadership, participation, and influence of those most impacted. The seventh is leadership development occurs at all times. We are not led by individual charismatic leaders. Rather, we have an accountable model of power sharing, power consensus, and collective leadership ethic. The eighth and the final one is we support our work together by sharing information, resources, knowledge, skills, relationships, funding, strategies, and opportunities, visibility, access, and political wisdom. And thank you all for allowing me to read today, and I'll turn it back over to Tafari.
Thank you very much, good brother. And definitely, I'll play the role of bridge one more time. So eventually, you're gonna get the opportunity to hear from these four wonderful folks. Lynn actually up first, but we want to introduce you to some of the facilitators and panelists for tonight's discussion, just so we can kind of talk a little bit about where we're going to go from here. So we're going to share a little bit about the story of the YPAR project, how it came to be, what the partners that have helped make it happen, who's been involved in that process. We'll talk a little bit about the findings that have emerged so far. This still is very much a living project. So data is still being collected, stories are still being told. And so we want to also be able to give you a snapshot of some of the key things that are coming from the folks that we are working with. And so Lynn is going to play a much more facilitator role in a bit, And then we have the brilliant Ashana, Lorraine, and Kalia, representing various organizations connected to the Dignity in Schools campaign, who will be sharing their brilliance in a little bit. But we wanted to show you some of the partners that are involved in this project. And the biggest one in this case is externally the Annie Casey Foundation. So the Dignity in Schools campaign just is appreciative of the partnership that has helped make this YPAR project possible. And for a little bit of information about who Annie E. Casey is, they're just a private philanthropy firm based in Baltimore and working across the country that makes grants that help federal agencies, states, counties, cities, and neighborhoods create more innovative, cost-effective responses. You all can fill in the rest on your own, but it's been a great partnership to help birth this kind of slowing down and deeper dive into things beyond the numbers and beyond the percentages. There's always a human face, a human life, and human lives behind these data points. And I think this YPAR project was particularly meaningful in returning to that kind of practice in storytelling and narrative construction. But so what is YPAR? The short version of it is it's an approach to research. It's a working theory that's used by researchers, academics, community movement folks, and so on and so forth. That really is a positive approach and an innovative approach to community development based in social justice principles, in which young people are trained to conduct systematic research to improve their lives, their communities, and the institutions intended to serve them. All participants contribute expertise and share decision-making processes. And so this YPAR project, this style of research was important because we really wanted to walk with, if we say that we hold the value that like those that are most affected and impacted by these systemic practices should be at the center of decision making, the center of solution making, then they also are active participants in the role of the diagnosis, the prognosis, the story of what's happening, not just what needs to change. And so for us, we think that this model of peer-to-peer exchange, collective discourse and conversation. So this included group interviews, one-on-one interviews, storytelling projects together where youth got to really exchange and dialogue with each other. There were questions that were developed to kind of try to paint a broad portrait that could allow us to see what is similar across the nation and what is not similar, what is unique to certain places, and how can the relationship between both of those dynamics help inform our policies, mobilizations, calls to action, ways of stimulating movement in school buildings with school children, and supporting that work at a ground and grassroots level. And so to close my voice for a little bit, I'm gonna pass it over to Lynn, who is going to share with us a little bit about the how in the journey of where we are now. So Lynn, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. So with this project, as Tafari said earlier, it's been going on for about 18 months, starting in January 2022, with the recruitment process of finding out who was going to be involved, and then moving on to understanding YPAR, what it is, how we were going to engage, which led us to the design process that took place with the various groups that I'll share with you who they were in a minute, on designing what the project would look like, how we would move forward in doing the work of collecting the story and giving voices to those in the community in a bigger way. And so from the design process, moving on to story collection, which is still happening, which started in September, and those things are still being gathered, as well as the findings from March until now. You're going to get a preview of where we are with the video production now and what we have so far, and then moving into the next steps and beyond. What's next? What are we going to do with what we learned? And so the organizations that have been involved in this wonderful work thus far is Black Students of California United. They were the regional coordinator on the West Coast. Community Education Project of New Orleans, Regional Coordinator in the South. Racial Justice Now, Regional Coordinator in the Mid-Atlantic. Sisters and Brothers United, Member Committee in the Northeast, and I Vote for Me, Member Committee in the Mid-Atlantic. We also want to give a huge shout out to Boston Youth Organizing Project in the Northeast, the Fannie Lou Hamer Center for Change in the South, and DWH Inspires and the Woman of God's Design Ministry in the Midwest for being part of the YPAR design process. So at this time, we're going to begin to hear about our findings.
So yeah, so we are going to talk a little bit about what has been emerging so far, and to help us kind of walk through that process, we're going to bring Ashana to the fore. So Ashana, if you are ready, I can bring you up, and you can begin telling us a little bit about what we are looking at.
Okay, hi everybody. So because we have so many findings, the unequal application of school discipline policies. A lot of this stuff, which you guys see, we already know, we've been going through it. What I really want to get into is what surprised us, because students being treated differently based on race, ethnicity, class, ability, gender presentation, the marginalization of students, the harsh treatment. I mean, literally, that's what we've been doing for the last 10 years. Can we go to the next slide? Because I feel like, I don't know, I hate preaching to, the same things over and over again. The real concerns about violence in schools and schools having to take matters into their own hands. Now, this is something I feel like we haven't gotten as in depth in. Many students sharing how they felt physically unsafe in school. I mean, we do know that. But also resulting in feeling like them having to bring weapons to school for self-defense. Of course, which can lead to immediate involvement in the criminal justice system, something we've all been working on and working with. As we also feel students engage in fighting to protect themselves, again, that's why we're pushing for restorative justice, because we understand that there's a beginning to a lot of this stuff, there's restorative justice methods instead of extreme suspension, expulsion, etc. And we know in many cases they call 911. There's a lot of arrests for fighting instead of calling parents or guardians. I'm sorry, I keep going like I can. So factors pushing youth into the criminal justice system, understaffing of teachers, inequitable numbers of students, for support staff, not having counselors, not having social workers. Again, some of the campaigns that we've all, I feel like, been in, counselors instead of police having them involved. Students need tailored support staff, academic, social, teachers, school staff. We know they need more social workers, more counselors. And we'll talk more about some of the things that came up as we were interviewing students. Students feeling a strong sense of disconnection, of lack of belonging. Almost all of the students we spoke to referred in different ways of some way feeling isolation from their peers, families, or communities. Serious and concerns about overall mental health of young people. In this moment, of raising rates of depression, anxiety, and other mental health challenges. Because we all know, not only students, but everybody, all of our communities that are going through a lot of mental health issues. They were going through things pre-COVID, but definitely the isolation of the pandemic exacerbated problems. So, and I don't know, I'm doing the solutions too, okay. So solutions are preventing young people from being pushed into the justice system. Robust resources for students to address the root causes of misbehavior and violence in schools. Adequate staffing with large teams of caring adults. Available meetings for students where they are. Meeting students where they're at is very important. Just finding out, talking to them. If we want students to have an equal opportunity to reach their full potential in schools, they must have infrastructures to meet students' needs. Again, a lot of the things we participated in, the counselors, not cops, speak to that. No. Factors that are pushing kids into the justice system. real decision-making roles for students. So I guess this is solutions still, it's still on solutions. Real decision-making roles for students with direct levels of opportunity for all students to engage, as well as decision-making positions for students to exist in existing structures like school leadership teams and school boards. Like that's important because a lot of times the student council do not have real decision-making. They do not look at discipline policies, support policies. They're not even able to weigh in on how school funding, like if they have a big pot of money for security, for students to even say, you know, we think part of security would be having more school counselors or having a school therapist or things like that. So that's really important. Next slide.
Thank you.
Okay, that's okay.
I think that's
Thank
it.
you.
That's, and then we get to the video. Yep. So thank you very much for that. And as I do get ready to bring that up, I do also just want to invite Lorraine or Kalia, who are both on, who you will hear from more in a minute, if they wanted to add anything. I think what you were tending to, Ashana, about the surprises. Is there anything surprising, Lorraine or Kalia, that you would like to bring to the floor before we introduce you all both more formally? But just want to give you an opportunity to chime in now as well.
Hey, DSC family. So Safari, I don't think there was anything surprising. I think so much of this research, at least for me, confirmed exactly what we all knew. And that's also like really like consoling and comforting to a lot of these families, right? Because when they feel like they're isolated, they feel like this is just their singular experience. And so now when we're saying, listen, this is not just regional, this is not just Virginia over here. We're hearing the same things in New York. We're hearing the same things in New Orleans. We're hearing the same things in Detroit. It's affirming and confirming because the school districts will have us believe and have these parents believe that they're making this stuff up. And these are very real experiences. So this work, this research is really important. I didn't see anything that was surprising.
Just to piggyback off of what Ms. Lorraine said, hi, my name is Kalia, and it's nice to see everyone. But there was nothing that was really surprising. Me being a young person myself, I'm not too far removed from a lot of the experiences that I was getting from the children who were still in high school, still in middle school that we were interviewing. None of it was really surprising. It was just, like you said, affirming to know that it's not just in our schools, it's in schools all across the country, and that we're finally taking the steps to really address the issues systematically from the top down. So the findings really helped to confirm the things that we were experiencing, and I'm happy that we were able to be a part of that.
Thank you both very much for both of those statements. And as I get ready to play the video, it brings to mind another, I think, important factor to consider that may not have shown through the data so far. And it's kind of synthesizing the 3 points that were just made. Is it also just as students are confirming and things that have been issues continue to be issues. In some ways they've gotten worse, in some ways they've shifted but remained consistent. I think what that also kind of speaks to is that, the solutions that our communities have been speaking to and working on refining and developing are also just as correct. And so it would make sense that if those changes have been slow and complex in terms of their happening, that it is a reminder that, we are unfortunately not organizing on, neutral terms. We are unfortunately in a social and political dynamic where, there are folks that are not just ignorantly adversarial, but like intentionally so. And it's exactly to create the impacts that the students were talking about, of feeling alienated, of criminalization, of not enough support staff. Like these are the things that are being denied by design and by decision to young people generally, poor, Black, brown, working class, oppressed folks particularly. And so it is also, I think, worth noting that, the issue is not in our analysis or our prognosis. It is in, organizing the strength necessary to make the conditions, what they are. But so I think that's really good work to find. But what we're going to do now is this video is about 8 minutes. You're going to get the opportunity to hear from some of the young people. And I know that phrase is used a lot, young people, and it's just like an amorphous field of folks. But I think it's really important to recognize that, these voices are critically important, and the people the people behind them are incredibly important as well. And so it's courageous to speak up and speak out and to tell the truth on camera. And so just want to shout out the students and the participants in this as we get ready to watch it. So sit back, relax, or pull out your notepad if you want to do that. And I'm going to play the video and let me know if you all can hear it.
What do you believe are the biggest factors pushing students into the justice system?
Well, basically like school policing, the school to prison pipeline, like having metal detectors in our school, having SSAs, like literally everywhere we go in our schools, like just always seeing police and always being policed makes us accustomed to being policed. So like I feel like eventually it pushes us into the justice system.
There's not enough equality in schools. It's just like most of them, it's like teachers have a hierarchy and they feel, because they're older and because they're teachers, they just make the choices and that's that. And they don't really listen to what students have to say. They also feel like they should be respected, and majority of the times they don't respect students. So it's like respect goes both ways. So they're trying, students, they're trying to make that happen.
Lack of resources and lack of support from people.
I don't know, to be honest. I feel like they're getting pushed into jail or suspensions over dumb stuff. Like, say for example, you were beefing with somebody online and they just snitched on you. You don't have to go to jail for that. It's a dumb reason. So I feel like kids shouldn't even get suspended just for stupid stuff like that. Unless the kid has a knife with them or a gun, then yeah. But if it's just in general, then no.
I think one of the biggest challenges that students face is not feeling comfortable with the staff members to ask for help when they need it.
Adding on to that, I also believe that students aren't given enough support from our staff.
Like, it's another struggle trying to find teachers who can cater to your needs, like who will understand, like, I guess, what will help you learn the best, because there's not so many teachers that can do that. But when you find a good few, it's like you only have that for like a year or so.
I don't really think students have like that much of a say in it. It's pretty much a set like policy. I feel like if students really wanted to push forward for something, they can maybe try, but I don't think it would get that far.
Do you think that out of school suspensions are effective as a disciplinary tactic?
I do not think they are effective, only because I think students see it more as like a vacation outside of school rather than, like a punishment. I think a lot of students just sometimes give up on school because it's not in their interest. But if it were, then I think it would help a lot of students succeed. And then that all starts with the community and how it starts at home.
Say if there's like a kid that gets in trouble in school a lot, like always getting referrals, always like fighting or something like that, they'll always like go straight to suspension or like punishment, or like send them to a whole different school surrounded by more people that do the same things instead of trying to help them.
That makes me feel unsafe is when they like tighten restrictions. Like, okay, you install a metal detector in the school, you search bags, you're doing all this extra stuff, which is supposed to ensure safety, but kind of gives the opposite effect. Like,
right,
what is going on in the school that you feel the need to do this?
Yeah.
So I don't know, something like that. We're in an environment where they feel the need to do those things, even like you're not allowed to move in the hallways at certain times of the day. It's like, okay.
Abuse and lack of attention.
What do you believe are the best solutions to keep students in school?
hear them. Just listen to what they have to say. Don't immediately shut them down. Just try. At least try.
Have someone that's there for the kids, and that's what they actually love to do, like really talk to the children about what's going on, because some people, they feel like children come to school just gruntle and they just don't want to be there, or they just want to be hard-headed, or it's not that. A lot of people go through different things and just take it out, a lot of people have random depression waves and or grief, a lot of stuff that just shows out in different ways, and they don't really believe in, oh, something's actually wrong at home, or something's actually wrong with, inside of the child. They just believe that they just want to be disgruntled and mad all the time and not listening, hard-headed and all that. But I don't believe that's the case.
Like I was saying, restorative justice, having more guidance counselors, having less cut that out. Having less suspensions and hard disciplinary strategies that don't really work. And I also feel like we should do more experimenting, because the only thing students really know is suspensions or getting expelled or having detention. We aren't really accustomed to any other type of disciplinary strategies. So experimenting and seeing what works best and what actually helps us would be more effective and more restorative.
Having more counselors, having more access to resources such as books, computers, stuff like that.
Reformative justice and communication.
Schools don't really try to help kids build their motivation to do their work. They just tell kids to do their work, or just give kids the work, instead of trying to get kids in the right mindset so they can really do their work.
I think students really just need to know who they have, whether that's teachers, friends, or counselors, just a way and somebody to go talk to.
For people to listen. Yeah. For us to be heard. Yes. About anything. It take action. Smallest thing, just for us to actually make a change and have a change about it. Because you can say anything, and people just won't listen. At all.
First of all, better lunches, because you can't really focus with whatever slop they serve you, but better lunches, better transportation systems, because it's hard to get to school, and just overall, the teachers were amazing, but I felt like they could have had some help with the schools themselves providing the teachers with more resources instead of the teachers having to dig away themselves all the time, because they love doing that for us, but they need help too. So I would have it whereas the resources available would not just be diverse in language, but in culture too, and even social ranking. It felt like it was general middle class everything. This is what the standard is, when in reality we're all poor, and it's not the same kind of image every time.
We have a limited range on what we can affect with the school board decisions to make, and I feel like we need more influence over that, because it's us who's getting affected by it. So when we don't have enough communication to those lines of people who are rather higher up and who can actually do a huge impact for us, that's cool. We don't get that.
Can you explain what the transformative justice team does?
It's restorative justice. They try to reform, they try to reform the students, make it to where they understand what they did was wrong, and try to show them that there's a different way they could express themselves.
So instead of just straight up suspending people, they actually talk to the students.
That was great. Great job. Great video. Shout out to everyone that participated in the video, to the editor for pulling everything together. It was fabulous. I know we were having a little visual little something going on there where we had some black lines going across the screen, but I'm sure we can take a look at that later in its entirety. Full beautiful screen of all of our young people in that video. So now we're going to take a few moments and we're just going to have a conversations with these beautiful queens, Miss Ashana, Miss Lorraine, and Miss Kalia. We're just going to talk a little bit. And the first thing I want to ask you all, when we talk about and we see the methodology of a participatory action research and this particular methodology, why is it important that we begin to use this type of research in our organizations and in our community specifically?
I guess I'll go. I didn't want to be first because I was already talking, but I would say you definitely need to hear from multiple people, and you have them in a space where they feel comfortable, because a lot of times I feel like they do these surveys in the school a lot of times with young people where they don't feel comfortable giving their full answer, and then a lot of times answers are sometimes given through a lot of questions or through stories that you wouldn't ordinarily get through a survey, because the answer is more complicated than a yes or no or a maybe. And so I think that's what's important. At least that's what came through all of the participatory research we do.
I can agree with that. I think it's really important to highlight the qualitative aspect of this type of research. A lot of the things that we seen in this study couldn't be collected, like you said, through a yes or no or through numbers, because students and parents don't feel comfortable reporting certain things. So just because it's not reported doesn't mean it's not felt or experienced. So I feel like getting those stories was really, really important. And then also having the most impacted at the table to help create the studies, like being able to help formulate the questions, being able to help formulate how the interviews will go, and being a part of that also helped, because we were able to say what we thought would bring the answers out and get the real story out versus it being thrown at us and we trying to fit into what we think the answer should be. It put out organic answers and organic experiences. So I think that this model was really effective in getting the true experiences of the most impacted.
I concur. And so I'm gonna wrap it up by saying it was incredibly empowering for these students to be able to be heard in this way. And so just like Kalia said, normally it's very structured and limited, and we don't ever really get to hear the content, or we hear the content, but we don't get to hear the emotion in the story. And now we've almost kind of created this model that shows them how to tell their story the way they want to tell it, with all transparency, whatever that looks like for them, and feel comfortable doing it. Just the fact that we showed them that it's okay to tell your story however you want to tell your story. You have the floor. It helps them just be a little bit more comfortable now sharing and resisting and challenging when it doesn't feel right. And so I really loved that aspect about this whole process.
Okay, great, which I agree with all of that. I am totally a proponent of owning our own story. Let me tell it, because you can't tell it better than I can tell what's going on with me. Let me tell it. So listening at some of the findings, and you all referred to that you weren't surprised by some of the findings, and it was affirming as to what actually came out of these surveys and this research. So with being affirmed with the research and having these solutions, now what are we ready to do? What are we prepared to do in regards to let's changing this system?
I want to back up and say I was a little surprised.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna go there too, Anna. I was gonna go there too, but go ahead.
I mean, for the majority of it, I wasn't surprised, but I didn't just interview children in the worst schools. I interviewed children who went to some of the best schools or who had graduated from some of the best schools. And what they had to say was very surprising. In fact, the girl in the last girl from New Orleans, the one who was talking about lunches, she went to one of our top tier schools, the top tier schools in the state. When she talked about her teachers not having resources and not having transportation, and having disgusting lunches and feeling not supported as a student who had needs. And that's where the surprise is. The 5 schools everybody's trying to get into that are 70% Caucasian and upper middle class are having some of the exact same problems. Not all of them.
Ashonda, you hit it on the head because it was an anomaly almost. I almost forgot about it, but it's such an important story. And much like Ashonda just said, there's a young lady in middle school, and because she's in the IB program, Advanced International Baccalaureate program, she is the only one in her entire, program that's a girl of color, right? And so she tells the story of how she had this one teacher for 2 years who refused to say her name. She said in 2 years, this teacher never called her by her name, but called every other student in the class by their name. So she also said, well, listen, Miss Lorraine, we had this one activity where there was a wheel with everybody's name and we were doing this drill before the test. And she said, I knew for sure that day she would call my name because she had to if the wheel spun on it. The wheel got to her name and the teacher said, do you want to come up here to the front? And still never acknowledged her. So think about how that feels or how that could feel. You're invisible. And so we're talking about these gifted students and look at the assassination to, their confidence that's happening on a day-to-day basis. She said that sometimes she grabs her hands and puts her hands in fists so much and so tight that her palms start to bleed because she's having anxiety. This is real. This is real. She said there was this one class where the entire class period, not just the beginning, not just the entire class period, there was a whole table of students that she was expected to engage with for this group project that was on a site, reddit.com, and all they were saying for the entire time were these racist and homophobic jokes. And the teacher sat there and didn't intervene. So how is she to feel supported? And so these are our kids' experiences. I just heard of, and this is not even, regarding the project, but I heard of a student today in elementary school who was doing so well and just moved another elementary school, and he was being bullied since the beginning of the school year. He came in with all A's and 1 B, straight F's, because he's afraid to even answer a question now because the teacher told him, if this person keeps bothering you, you need to learn how to fight, as opposed to stopping the bullying. So this is what our kids are dealing with. And as a 47-year-old adult, that's hard for me to process. So when we're talking about these undeveloped brains, these kids that are coming into school with the expectation of having fun, having this engaging environment, I'm ready to learn, and feeling and being treated like this is devastating. And we have to be able to acknowledge that in a real tangible way.
So I still kind of stand on what I said, where it's not surprising, because like I said, I'm not as far removed from the education system. I graduated high school in 2020. So a lot of the realities that the students were bringing up were realities that I was going through 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019. I come from the talented and gifted program all through elementary school and been in STEM and university magnet school since middle school and high school. So even as a quote unquote talented and gifted student, upper echelon academic student type deal, you still get that improper treatment. Teachers not taking the intentionality to either learn your name or pronounce it correctly. I have had so many pronunciations of my name, it's insane. But they never take the intentionality. I always have to correct you every class period to say my name the correct way. It does do things to your self-esteem. It does do things to your confidence, because it's like, if what makes me, what identifies me, is something that can just be misconstrued and contorted into whatever you want it to be, what does the rest of me come as? What is the rest of me presented like to you? No matter how I present it, you can always contort it to be whatever you want it to be. The realities of suspension not being what it needs to be for disciplinary reasons. My friends getting suspended and they're just outside, like outside. We're not reforming nothing. We're not learning anything. We're just outside, because if we're not in school and our parents are at work, who's to tell us where to be, what to do? So you're suspending us into less structure, and you're suspending us into basically a nothingness. So everything that I was hearing, it was just like, dang, like it's finally being heard by the right people. So when you were talking about solutions and what that looks like now that we have this information, it feels like it's falling on the right ears this time, not deaf ears, but open ears and listening ears, and falling into the hands of adults that can actually do something to change this. Because the solutions, the problems have been the same. Like what we've been talking about, we've been saying to our elected officials, our school board members, our teachers, and it just feels like, oh, that's so sad. Like, I'm sorry for your experiences, but it's business as usual. So now that we're able to get it to more ears and it's one universal message across the country, it just feels like now the solutions we propose can actually be implemented. They can actually start to be worked upon, getting redirected to counseling services versus out of school suspension in alternative schools, being able to get cultural competency trainings for teachers and other staff members to learn not only how to teach us academically, but how to speak to us culturally. It doesn't mean that you learn all of our slang. It means that you're intentional about learning our name, that you're intentional about working through accent barriers or language barriers and stuff like that. So solutions actually being heard from us by the people that can actually change it, I feel like is the biggest takeaway I've taken from this project in particular.
Excellent, excellent. Go ahead, Ashana, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to say when you started talking about solutions. So one of the solutions that came up, but that I didn't know it was pervasive. I knew it was a problem. I knew that teachers crossing boundaries with students was a problem. You always have a few male teachers and a couple of female teachers who cross boundaries, who go to clubs or whatever, but I did not know how pervasive the problem was. Like almost every school has a couple of people who actively date and groom students. We need to have trainings on boundaries for students and teachers, so students know when a teacher is crossing boundaries. Because yes, it's okay for your teacher to tutor you after school. No, it is not okay for that teacher to ask you for pictures of yourself. Like, I mean, even if you send them a graduation, that's one thing, but you know, these teachers are asking for bikini pics and yeah, they're sending cash apps. It's bad. It is bad down here. And I did not, again, even though I spent a lot of time doing a lot of educational advocacy, I go when parents or students call me. A lot of these situations that students have normalized, they're like, oh yeah, you could get money from him if you just send him a topless pic. He'll send you a $75 cash app. And I'm like, what? No, that's illegal. That's illegal. And I have to, but the students need to be tutored because that's child pornography, especially here in Louisiana. Even if you send a topless pic of yourself, you are sending child pornography and you can get on a charge. And the fact that a teacher is soliciting a child to engage in things that they can get them arrested, it's insanity. But yeah, there needs to be training so the students will know, so the staff will know, so everybody will know, even though the staff shouldn't need a training, but yeah.
Yeah, some things to us, it just seems like you should know that, and that's common sense. So once again, what are we prepared to do? What are we prepared to do to actually move the needle in the direction of finding solutions for this? As we heard, and you guys pointed out, that even our students who are in the best of schools and the best of programs, who are doing their best academically, who are excelling academically, they're still the victims of inappropriate behaviors, microaggressions. What are we prepared to do to move this forward?
So I think sometimes we spend so much time and energy fighting the system that we don't direct that energy towards our kids, right? And these kids in this way. So what Ashana just said, also what Kalia was talking to, is if kids really understood their power, if they understood that they have the power to say no, if they understood that this was inappropriate, if they understood what their rights were, you understand? So we have to reestablish this baseline. And I think I've come to this like personal conclusion that I'm really tired of fighting a system that's built to sustain itself. So I'm gonna leave that to the folks who like to do that and who like to go to Congress and that's just not for me. I want to focus on our kids that I can have a direct relationship with, that I have influence with, that I have an ear with, because that's the transformational change I'm seeking from the ground up. Right? When we're talking about these grassroots efforts, we can move this like systemic change, but we have to have this parallel effort. And I remember saying this a couple of years ago, and I've been saying it since, like, we have to fight the power and empower the people at the same time. Because when we spend so much time on this, pushing this systemic change, listen, y'all, we talked about unequal, treatment. Listen, there's an inequitable application of the law, and it's always been. So while we're fighting for these new legislations and new laws on the books, we have laws on the books right now that are not honored in terms of protecting our rights as humans. And so I'm not going to give much more of my energy in that respect. And so for me, and again, this is just a personal shift for me, it's much more focused on how can I empower these youth to just really understand where their power lies.
I agree with that. I feel like the way that I can push the needle is being kind of like the training and technical assistance and support to students, because I've had experience and advocacy on various levels, being able to teach students how to advocate for themselves and how to lift their voice up in spaces where they feel like they've been muted, teaching students, like you said, when it comes to grooming, things that aren't okay from a youth perspective, because you can hear it from an adult and think that that adult is just being a mom or being an adult and they don't really understand. But hearing it from a youth perspective, like, there's nothing that you can really offer a grown man other than being manipulated, other than being, groomed and things like that. And being able to teach them the words to say to convey their point in a way that is heard is a loss in the way that we deliver our issues and in the way that we deliver our problems. So teaching them not the appropriate way to say it, but a way that's more palatable to the adults that need to hear it and things of that nature. So it's really helping me to learn how to become more educated and how to tailor what I already know to give it to my friends and to give it to the students coming up behind me so they know what to do. Because like Ms. Lorraine said, it's going to be extremely difficult to move a system that's been moving on its own for years and years and years, centuries before I even was thought of. So this has taught me to not stay local, but to focus locally before I branch out and fix the problems within the schools that I'm around before branching out into the bigger Congress and the bigger national issues, because the things that are going on nationally are happening right in our backyard. And so we need to tailor it to what's close to us.
Great. I'm sorry. The other thing I want to say real quick is I didn't realize how badly our students and parents need race analysis. And the reason they need it is because a lot of times they will find allies. So one of the young people was devastated because she found an ally in this young white woman who was really helping her, who was a great, very energetic teacher. But when she told the young white woman that she came from a super Christian background and there's certain things that they didn't align with ideology wise, she basically told her that her family was stupid and backwards and ignorant, and, cut connections with the girl because she wouldn't agree to the fact that her family and her family's beliefs were ignorant. And it really hurt her because that was her only ally in school. And I was like, that wouldn't have hurt you as bad had you had a better analysis and understanding. Even when you do have allies, their allyship a lot of times comes with you agreeing and holding up what I believe in. And the second you don't do that, that allyship is gone. And just being able to prepare our children better for understanding how to navigate these systems, kind of what you just said about talking to young people. So I think it's so important, because even if I'm using my mom voice and you're not listening to me, to be like, this is what I experienced, this is the race analysis, just know and being able to just support our children more as they go through that. So she wouldn't have just that one white woman to depend on as an ally in school.
And you know, Ashana, what you said is so true. So I took some young people up to DC when Racial Justice Now had their culturally relevant curriculum event. It was great. And one of the young ladies that went with me, about a month later, she texted me and she's like, "Hey, Miss Lorraine, do you have the video from that culture lesson we learned?" Because I was telling my friends that slavery started, or our story started way before slavery. So what I do know is that they leverage their peers. And so that's where we have to focus, because the message is not, I can't reach my children like their best friends can reach them. And so me knowing that, like, let me get to who I can get to, and then I'm gonna let y'all pollinate and go ahead and do the rest. And so that's such a great strategy.
Absolutely. I think that is the greatest strategy, because right now I am in my 4th year of doing peer-to-peer peacemakers, training the young people to be the circle keepers, to be the advocates. And I'm in a position now where I'm just standing behind them and like, okay, do y'all thing, go ahead. That's what I'm talking about. So I think one of the strategies is to empower the young people, you know, because they can speak the language that we can't speak to others. You know, there's a whole nother language out there. And somebody has in the chat, do we have policies about teachers bullying students?
As a person who's done a lot of restorative justice circles, we should. We don't, but oftentimes there are teachers who definitely bully students in a way that a lot of times other adults have to come in and intervene. And a lot of times when that's a parent coming in, the parent is not believed. The parent, especially if that parent is Black or brown, they're seen as irate and, you know, the problem. But what we tell students constantly now is to record it. Like, if you can, because in Louisiana, you have the right to record any meeting, that's legal. So it's like, if you put your phone, you know, record as much of that interaction as possible so that we can have proof.
I think in every rights and responsibilities handbook or like school code, there is something about mutual respect. Now, how that's enforced is dependent upon the school. And most of the time it isn't enforced when it's a teacher to a student. Of course, if a student is being insubordinate, the teacher is rallying up, sending us to assistant principals, getting us dismissed and everything. But when it's a teacher to a student, it's like the student's word against the teacher, and they always believe the teacher or the professional. So I feel like there is policy, but it's all about enforcement, and it's not enforced. And so learning how, or advocating for transparency, and like you said, having the ability to record, because a lot of school districts don't allow us to even have our phones out, no matter, of course, instances within schools. So making transparency and accountability in those policies a thing, not just having the policies, I think is really important.
In the chat, someone has given us said it's usually in part of the personnel manual about the teacher bullying and those types of policies. So check in that. But it has been my experience that it goes back to what we said was part of the factors, and what we was learning is that unequal application, even from the teacher to student, you know, in some situations, yeah, it will be applied, but then there are unequal applications of what are already the policies. So that goes back to that. So what I want to see if there are any other questions or comments in the chat, or that we can get to in our time together.
Does anybody have any other questions about the
other questions about the project, how it was done?
Yeah, I would like to know, what is there more?
Is there more?
Are you talking about, Cam, are you talking about the video? Because that 8 minutes of video was just a snippet. There's so much more video,
No,
but
I'm looking for more like data because so far, I heard what the students were saying. Um, and I just want to, convey like one of the things that I deal with here is in regard to students being able to record is that students are recording, the fights in their schools and then they're putting their peers out there on social media. And then the school system is going on social media and using that for to justify why I need to suspend your peer. So what I've been trying to advocate for here locally is one, schools should not be using my child's phone, first of all, against another student. And parents need to get control of that. And districts should not. So that's another thing. I don't know if that came out of any of the data, but that when we're talking about peers snitching, we have to help our children to stop doing that foolishness, recording their friends and putting it on social media, because the schools are using it against our students.
But I just want to say real quick, the schools are not allowed to do that. I mean, they're not allowed to go into someone's personal phone. I mean, because even I, as an advocate, when I had a case where a teacher was trying to report a student she said had threatened her, and she had been sending that student inappropriate pictures, like I couldn't take his phone and show the pictures. Like his mom had to come and pull the pictures up. She was trying to call the
No, I
police.
agree.
Yeah.
We're on the same page, but I'm just letting you know here locally where I am, parents aren't given permission for the schools to use their children's data. And I've been calling it out here. I've been calling it out here on my principals. So I'm just saying I don't know what's going on around in other places, but I'm more concerned about the students that are recording one another when a fight breaks out and all the things, and then they are putting somebody's child on social media. We need that conversation as well.
Cam, that's such a great like pivot point, because I had a conversation with the principal of my daughter's school. She goes to Highland Springs High School, and there was this fight that broke out in October where police pepper sprayed these students, right? But in this fight, they basically put it, they were looking to expel just about everybody. There were students that didn't even receive a call. They just received a letter saying you're not allowed to come back to the school, right? And so the one young lady that I advocated for, who was actually interviewed in this project, I had to like, it was crazy because I just dropped my daughter off at school that day. And I was getting ready to leave the parking lot, and she was walking out of the school, principal behind her, and she was just cursing and she was screaming, and she was just like, somebody's about to die. I was like, what's going on? And so she asked me, she was like, well, who is you? And I said, I'm just somebody who's wanting to find out about you and make sure you're okay. Because if you were my daughter, I'd hope somebody comes and sees about you, sees about her. And sometimes we're not looking at and not taking responsibility for everybody's children. Sometimes that's what's missing. I'm not my sister's keeper. I'm my sister, and we can't neglect those opportunities that we see to intervene, right? Not everybody has an Ashana to advocate for them. Not everybody has the insight that Kalia has to advocate for them. And so I think for us, we just have to be able to seize the opportunities that we have. I don't know that there's a playbook for this, right? There's no script to this. We have to have the will and desire, and we all do. And so what that means is sometimes we just got to step in where the opportunity presents itself. And that's where students really feel like we're committed. We're committed to the outcome, whatever it is. We're committed to their futures, whatever that may be, and just not aligning with how the school does what they do.
I think another thing to that point is, like y'all were saying, really educating the students, because as a young person, Like that stuff is what we gravitate to. You know, we're very young minded, and that stuff is entertainment to us. And it gets us followers, it gets us likes, it gets us traction to our pages. So when we record a notable fight and we post it, we're not thinking about the repercussions. We're not thinking about police and principals using our pages as evidence. We're thinking about all the followers that we're getting, all the DMs that we're getting, people coming to us as inside scoop, and we're attracted to the clout of it all. And so educating students on the fact that people are watching our pages are public, educating students on the fact that our stuff is just being used as evidence without us even knowing, and that we're a part of our friends getting suspended. We're a part of our friends getting expelled, and we could even get expelled for holding things like that. I feel like that's super important, because a lot of my friends found out after the fact that we were a part of the problem. We didn't know that we were, because we were in our own world. We were in our own reality. In our reality, that's cool. We're seeing stuff like Bad Girls Club. We're seeing stuff like Zeus Network, where recording fights and promoting them gets you traction, it gets you clout, it makes you popular. And we're trying to emulate the things that we're seeing. And so I think very intentional education from the adults on the other side about what it looks like on your side is really important.
Thank you, guys. Milagro, you had your hand up, and I was seeing your hand go up, and then I see you, Miss Betty.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Hi. Yes, I was just gonna piggyback on what the other young lady was talking, Lakita, I think it was. Lakita Kirby. I'm not sure her last name.
Kim Irby.
Kimberly. Kim, yes. Basically it's true. The so much was said too, I almost forgot. Wait a minute. I heard a lot of good stuff, and I understand a lot of stuff, and I think it's important. You had asked what were we going to do about it, and what should we do to make things happen, different, work for the children. And I thought basically from everything that they spoke, they're asking for help, and they're not getting the help, you know. And I hear a lot like the discipline, and they need like the discipline avenues that assess children more ways, having them in having every child is knowing that every child is different and has different needs, and they have to look at that too, you know. But it doesn't look like they're focusing on helping the children. They're not helping them. And I think the teachers need to build communication with the children's needs, because they have needs, you know, but it don't sound like they're doing it. And I wanted to say something about I can't remember what she was talking about, because she said so much. All right.
That's all right, Milagro. I have those moments too.
Oh my God, so much is being said. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Milagro. Miss Betty.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Betty.
Several things. I think one of the things that needs to happen is we need to help our young people to understand and know what their rights are. When they are being violated, what is it that they need to do? How it is that they need to do as well. And to actually piggyback on something that Kim said, we need to help our young people while they are taking pictures, putting this on social media and all. When this gets to the school, a lot of this information goes inside of their folders. When they begin to go farther into education, even a job or whatever, that information is still there. And then we may sometime wonder why we did not get that job, or we may not have gotten whatever it was that we might have applied to. And that is because they look back at our records and all. We also, to the point when you all was talking earlier about the teacher and some of our children are in these so-called schools that is supposed to help. Policy goes across the board. So when that teacher is doing or saying something to that child that is inappropriate, or even how they are treating them, it needs to be brought out, because policy, as I said, goes across that board. My thing of it is, if a student had done that to a teacher, that's what they would have used on them. But the policies state, policies are not just for students. Teachers have policy. Those policies goes across the board there. So they need to be held accountable and responsible for what it is that they are doing as well. And we have to come to the point. Racism is still alive here. They just done changed it up a little, but it's still alive. And racism is not about hatred. It's about domination and control. How is it that they are still controlling us? How is it that they are actually doing it? And I think that one of the last things that I would say, so much is going on with mental health now that so many needs to basically be evaluated. Our children are dealing with not just children's stuff, but they are dealing with adult stuff of how it is that they are going to deal with it. What is it that they need to do? We have seen, we have heard so many of our young people are committing suicide simply because of bullying. And a lot of times it's not the students that is doing the bullying, it's the teachers that is actually bullying our children. And words have meaning to them. A teacher can sit there in that classroom and say something about that child that is there. And when they leave out, that another student in that class will come and do the same thing and say the same thing that that teacher said. The teachers are our biggest bullies that there is, though, when it comes to our children and all. But as I said, of going back, it is really good to help parents as well as students to understand what their rights are when they are actually being violated and all.
Thank you, Ms. Beck. That was just on point, on target. Yeah, all them snaps, all that, hands up, all that. So, Milagro, did your thought come back to you? I seen you put yourself on.
I don't know. I know that I was just thinking about the bullying by the teachers. I know, I think the teachers need to get training, and they need to be having report cards too, to see how they're doing with students, be checked up on, see how they're doing, things like that too, because that's the way it should be. Simply because if they can't be trusted with our kids, right? And another thing is, I hear this other stories that the teachers, there's lack of teachers now. Teachers are leaving. So then what are we gonna do? Like, I'm like, it's a give and take situation here, but we have to like keep pursuing for solutions. And I know that the children are children, and that's the part they're failing to see. They think because they come from different backgrounds or different way of being and stuff, that's what I think. They think that, well, we're just going to teach them and let them move on to the next grade, and that's not how it is. They're people, they're children. They need to be taught correctly.
That's absolutely right, Milagro. And with that should come accountability. That's something that we're pushing for and fighting here. There was a teacher in Richmond City Public Schools not too long ago, about a month and a half ago, who sixth grade young Latina girl, she was speaking Spanish to her peer. And the teacher told her to shut up. You speak English. We're in America, you speak English. You go back to whatever country you came from that speaks Spanish, but in here we speak English. That teacher should not be allowed to not only teach that child, but any child. There's no cultural sensitivity. There's no respect for culture. And so there's absolutely no way that teacher will make this academic connection with this child, because that child doesn't trust her. So we already know what the outcomes are going to look like for that child. So there needs to be accountability. We petitioned the Board of Education and the Virginia Department of Education, revoke these licenses, y'all. Revoke these licenses. Why are they still teaching? Why are they still here? There's this label called passing the trash. That's like, you didn't make it here. We kicked you out of here. You weren't fit enough for this county, but you're gonna go to another county. No, there needs to be something on their licensure that says you had this many complaints, just like should be the case for police officers, but there needs to be accountability. I remember in that same story I told you about, the superintendent said, I applaud the young lady for keeping her cool and keeping her composure. We shouldn't have to do that, y'all. We shouldn't have to do that. This sixth grader should not have to, subdue her temperament because an adult doesn't understand what cultural competency is.
Mhm. Another thing that's occurring too, Latino children that speak Spanish, they're being used to translate for all their issues in school. That shouldn't be happening. And they're not doing the right thing having interpreters there. They're not assisting each child to their needs.
But I think one of the other things that Lorraine said, rather than just with their license, they need to be written up and it needs to go in their folder. This is the reason why that the teachers can leave one county and go to another one, because it is not in their folder. They give them an opportunity to resign and all, but they take that same mess that they did at this school, at school A, they are taken right over to school B. It needs to be written up and it needs to be put in their folder, and that would help stop them of doing some of the things that they are doing that is not right toward our children.
And I want to say real quick about the teacher shortage. Part of this teacher shortage has to do with the fact that a lot of the schools are changing the way they educate. So it's like the teachers used to get a full lunch break and a planning period because children had recess and they had PE. Like even in a high school, you had recess, you had time after lunch where you got to socialize and you had PE. Because they've changed the structure of schools, a lot of the way the veteran educators educated, not to say we had the best educators, but we had a lot of times better educators than our children had. Because the other thing, the schools are powered with Teach for America teachers. I said teachers who had 4 weeks of training on how to educate. Most of them are not, do not have education degrees. And that's all over the country because they leave New Orleans and they leave the places like Chicago and they go every place. So we have a bunch of young, primarily white teachers who are not, education was not their first choice. It's what they landed on. So that's configuring like why we have such a turnover of teachers. And first of all, that's not my first choice anyway. Second of all, it's not conducive. To be honest, a lot of these schools are not conducive for people, much less children. And the third part, I would say one of the biggest solutions I feel like is we need to educate parents and community on what's actually happening in schools, because most of them do not know. They send their children to these schools. They think they're being educated. They're surprised to find out that their children don't have PE. Their children don't have a healthy lunch. Their children don't have recess. What do you mean? They have one bathroom break a day. That doesn't even sound, like we asked for passes whenever we had to go. What do you mean? So a lot of times parents and community are just completely out in the dark about what's actually happening in these schools. And if they found out, they would be horrified. But no one's telling them. And just even the different conditions of each of these schools. No one's telling them.
Absolutely. That is absolutely correct, Ashana, in making it known across the board what our children are actually experiencing from day to day. We had to have a whole campaign here in Chicago. I mean, marching and writing letters to get recess reinstated into schools, which is like, to me and to us, was like a no-brainer. You as an adult need a break in the day. Why would you not give children a break in the day? So, and parents were just shocked to find out, what do you mean they don't have recess? Recess is a part of school. Not anymore. Well, it is now because we fought for it, but yeah. So Tafari, I see your hand up.
No, I just wanted to, there's a couple of really powerful points that are being made in the context of the discussion. And you all know me, it made me think of a couple of books and a passage or two that I think are worth sharing. And I can share it more as a closeout, if that makes sense, because I think it'll be something to walk away with. It is a good thought experiment, but so I can pause and leave time for folks to finish up with any follow-up finalizing questions, and then I can share.
I was just gonna say one thing, and to Ashana's point, like we're working with a middle school now, MLK Middle School, that feeds from all of the projects in Richmond. And I want y'all to think about this. You understand how a lot of the times the projects are like real territorial. So one is battling against the other. So think about when these kids go to school, there's that inherent conflict. So we're really trying to create a model there, but we're starting this empowered parent pull-up. And let me tell you how I got this idea. Mark Warren, who's with the University of Massachusetts, Boston, who partners with DSC for that Willful Defiance project. But he invited me to be on this call. It was the Illinois Parent Mentoring, it was something else, program. I don't know what it was. But when I tell you, we had 2 calls that day. On the first call, it was almost 800 people on that call. The second call, it was like 650. I don't even understand how those numbers kind of came to be, but it was just parents, everyday parents all across the state of Illinois calling in, and they had these similar experiences and they were sharing. This one lady, she called in and she said, my son got abducted. He was kidnapped from school. She said they were Hispanic, didn't understand the language. They asked her to sign a form for her son to go to another school, and that school was almost like a holding pen for ICE, and then they deported him back to Mexico. And so all I'm saying is there is such power in galvanizing parents. So I love, and Kofi and Women of God's Design and everybody else who really organizes parents, that's really important work, because while we're getting the students, they still need that support of the parents. We still need that holistic support. So wherever y'all can really galvanize and get the parents together and organize them, and whatever it is you can do, our Empowered Parent Pull-Up, again, we just started, but it's the 3rd Monday of every month. I'm gonna send y'all a flyer if y'all want to just jump on. I don't know what it's going to look like, but we just decided that we needed to do that. And so right now it's just Virginia, but it's a space, and we're holding space. And that's what we all need to do, just hold space for whatever it is our communities need.
Absolutely. So I just want to acknowledge that there are some awesome comments in the chat that have been coming in. Miss Paulette is saying in the chat that her school district, her superintendent school district has followed students on social media with the intent of, using that information and shared it with the city police. So yes, absolutely. One great takeaway, empowering our students, letting our students know, letting our teens know that when you're posting on social media, you are helping them to feed the school to prison pipeline, because they very well could take your video. It could very well be your video that they use. What else do we have here in the chat? I want to bring those thoughts in. Questions about what's next with the YPAR project. What's next? What's next with the data? Is there going to be a part 2 to the video? So as we said, looking through the timeline, it continuously said, and now that we're still gathering the data, this data is still being worked through, stories are still being collected. So we're not done. There's going to be something else. There's going to be more. Miss Deb is in the chat right now, Ashana. TFA teachers have been poison for most Black and brown students across the country. Black educators never have had access to the kind of funding that TFA has. TFA embodies white privilege. Boom. There it is. Okay, so I want us to continue to stay engaged with this conversation and be on the lookout for more things to come. And Tafari, if you want to jump on in here right now, I think that'll be a good place to wrap up.
I wanted to say something quickly.
Okay, I'm sorry, Milagro. I did see your hand. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I wanted to let you know that there's a law that was just put out against bias crimes. It's not going to be tolerated any longer. There's a law that just came out. And parents are not allowed, and that's what I was trying to say earlier, that in the schools down here in New Jersey, the parents aren't allowed to see the data or any evidence that the child has done. Even if it's a video or anything, they don't show them. They just tell them, they don't show them the evidence. I don't know. I just wanted to say that because that happened to one of the children and they didn't show the evidence. They said they caught her using a vape, one of those vapes. And the child, they thought she was using drugs. They sent her to get drug tested right away and everything. It came back normal. She didn't have no drugs in her system, but still they held it against her. And
so Milagro, let me say something real quick. You know, I want to encourage you, but I also want to tell you that when you said it's a law now, so they can't do it. I want to challenge that because just because it's a law doesn't mean they can't do it. And when we look at laws that are passed, when we look at legislations that supposedly provide protections, who are they protecting? Because normally it's not us. So I just want us to always be vigilant. So when we pass a law, it's all right, there's a law passed, it's on the books, but who is it protecting?
Right. We have to fight for the rights of our children. It's so true. Thank you.
All right, y'all. So I will try to keep this. So, Ruth, I see your hand up. You want to chime in?
Yeah, just for a second. Since we're ending, I'm really grateful for everybody joining today. This has been wonderful. Thank you for the panel and all the participants who were part of this project. It's been a year-long project, but wanted to give a shout out to Ismanuela from NEKC, who has been our program officer through this project, and just wanted to say thank you for all of the patience and also the support that she offered to DSC during this this project. Thanks, Ms. Manuela. I think she's still on here somewhere. Yeah.
Thank you for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Ruth. And yes, Ms. Manuela, welcome again. Yeah, so I know our time is actually at the end, and I want to, so if folks need to go, please do go. But I think that this piece that I'm going to share is a worthy reason to hang out for maybe another 6 to 10 minutes. And because I think that it gets at some of what's underneath the conversation that we're having. And by that, in this case, I mean and actually even before I say that, let's two things. I want to check in with the interpreters and make sure they have a few more minutes, because I don't want to just assume that they are available for another 10 minutes. And then I certainly do not want to let the evening go by without shouting out Jessica, who has been doing all of the fantastic work to steward this YPAR project along. And I know it's early in the morning where she is right now, so we definitely want to shout her out for all of the work that she did to make this thing happen. And so thank you, Keo, for the reminder, because that definitely was a slip. Jessica's been instrumental in the project. And it is, if there were more time, we definitely, and it were early for you. I know you can't talk right now, but it'd be, yeah, hop in the chat, say your things and all that stuff. And at least I see you as well. So thank you for that. But yeah, so otherwise, folks, praise Jessica up in the chat. Otherwise, I actually want to invite you all to put on your listening ears for a second, because I think these two pieces I'm pulling from two books. One that I just recently read. I don't know if you can see me. No, the blur is on and it's not going to work well. So I'll put the link of these in the chat, but the title of this book is called Of Black Study by a guy named Joshua Myers. And then the other book I'm pulling from, or an essay at least, is called Black Nationalism, The Inevitable Response, which comes from someone by the name of James Turner, who was the founding director of the Africana Studies department at Cornell University, and one of the founders and really like key figures in like the Black Studies movement that I don't think we spend enough time talking about. But anyway, this book Of Black Study is talking through, it's speaking at a level of the academy in terms of like college, or speaking to issues that are mostly emanate out of that world. But I think what the author is saying here is really relevant as we think through the nature of what we're dealing with. So I'm gonna read through this, and I'll try to. The whole thing is worth reading, but I'll skip through a lot of the stuff. So it says, "We are surrounded. We who are in the academy looking for community like June Jordan and her students in 1969 are still surrounded. We have also made it inside the gate, but we are now cornered. This place, the university, is the destination," they said. "We were told that we had to be inside or else. And now that we are here, they lied to us, just as they lied to Jordan's students, just as they lied to the Black professors they hired when they demanded teachers less likely to lie. Just like they lied to the Black teachers who went to college in order to teach those Black professors long before 1969. They lied about us, about why we're here, how we got here, and what it means to be here. Although they would eventually again shut the gates, some of us made it through and have been here for a long time now, which means we have listened to these lies for a long time. The lies have changed, but they're still lies. Every now and then there's a slip, an exposure, and a seam opens. We seize on those moments because the lie that sustains what June Jordan called this system's profound exploitation of human life for material gain cannot exist forever. We say we believe. We enter a tradition of recognizing that this place and its knowledge are all a logical bundling of lies that mutilate and kill. That knowledge that we call normative, objective, and therefore universal is not simply a fiction or a construct. It is a mechanism of power, a force that imposes a particular kind of regime of truth on those who they lie about, who are said to have no knowledge to counter the lie. As we have queried the meaning of these lies, we have come up with many answers, even as there are deeper questions we know we should ask. Of Black Study is a remembering of the tradition through the lens of the lives of 4 Black intellectuals who questioned the lie at its most fundamental core, the very meaning of knowledge. They came to the university with questions that were not simply driven by why Black folk caught hell, not simply why poverty existed, not simply why there were disparities, lack, deprivation, deviance, not simply if we were in fact surrounded. They asked questions like how the nature of knowledge and knowing itself became the structure that housed the lies, how the architecture of the lie was not inherent in the lie itself. Almost done. How it must have come from some logic that preceded it. So it was not enough to respond to the sorts of lies Jordan wrote about with simple corrections, to ask whether the liars believed themselves to be telling the truth, to whether they understood what it was they were saying about us. There are lies, and there are intellectual traditions founded on lies. there is dishonesty, and there's a whole philosophy of life premised on particular assumptions of who we are. There is bad faith, and then there is a panoply of interests served by the lie for those who require them. In other words, asking what produces the lie rather than what constitutes the lie is a more necessary response than simply refuting the lie. For it is the lie, this capacity for lying, is the very idea of the West. And I think that that's just like a profound way to like talk about the nature of the system that produces the domination that we are responding to. And there's another piece I want to share, but given the time, I'll just maybe share that in text form at another time. But wanted to just share that and see if any of that had y'all thinking about, and just as a way to as we close out.
Yeah, I think it was a great end cap on what we've said, because that text contextualizes exactly what we just said. It gives a premise for, like, just in case you were wondering, if you were like thinking, if you were uncertain, this is what it is. And so I thank you, Tafari, just for inserting that clarity. Not that we didn't have it, but again, it's always helpful to have confirmation on top of the affirmation. So thank you.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Well, no, y'all, we ain't gotta hang out. It's long, it's been on long. So thank you, Tilde. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Lakita. Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you, Ashana. Thank you, Kalia. Thank you, Lynn. Appreciate y'all in the chat. And